Wild berries, and the involvement of the Kremlin moves in to create one last hurrah in the region. The Kremlin has moved in to create an army logistical hub out of wild berries, the Amazon of the East, and the biggest distribution program that has existed for the best formal of since 2004. Wildberries has captured its development to propagate goods into the hands of the Russian public. It started with just normal goods, food to medicine. But at the very end, the Kremlin became involved with hide-in strategy to show an edge in warfare, involving regular citizens to be involved in a danger that Vladimir Putin could not avoid, more Russian advances in the region of Ukraine. This is where the owners of Wildberries become wary of the impact that has happened in 7/19/26. Bombardment of drones have crossed to Moscow, the crossing of every defense and cultivated vulnerabilities that would cost many Russian failures during their defense. Several units in Moscow were directing and outlining directives for its summer offensive, medicine, and large amounts of MREs for a long stay in the region. It is these plans that have pushed Russia's army into the front line. Delivery and distribution. The company previously had services in France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Moldova, Poland, Slovakia, Spain, Turkey, the United States, and Ukraine. It is in these logistical corridors that Wildberries has become involved in since Russia departed from a Ukrainian attack. Their decisive command will coordinate movement and will link several transportation sectors and will procure assignments in these areas. Russia's logistical planning in the Ukraine Oblast. This designates troop removal in areas where Ukraine amassed their counteroffensive for the spread that would essentially defend against Ukraine's attack inside the region. Spread will logistically give every part of Russia's army to guard and surround Ukraine into a corner, as they call in their support, the cities, Donetsk and Luhansk. Let's do a strategic overview of Wildberries. Your text frame Wildberries, Russia's largest e-commerce platform, is a dual logistical asset, meaning it serves as a civilian distribution network and is repurposed to be a support military operation. This transformation reflects how modern conflicts increasingly blur the line between commercial infrastructure and state logistics. Economic and logistical dimensions. Civilian to military conversion. The the use of Wildberries supply chain for distributing food, medicine, and military rations suggests a shift towards civilian logistics mobilization, a hallmark of wartime economies. Network reach Wildberries prior operations in Europe and the Middle East gave Russia a ready-made international corridor, potential useful for procurement and transport coordination. The strategic leverage by integrating Wildberries into defense logistics, Moscow could reduce reliance on traditional military supply routes vulnerable to sanctions or interdiction. Military implications. Operational support. The company's infrastructure may have been adapted to sustain long-term troop deployments, particularly in the Ukraine Oblast, where counteroffensives are concentrated. Drone warfare impacts. The July 19, 2026 drone bombardment on Moscow exposed logistical vulnerabilities, disrupting supply chains and forcing defensive recalibration. So these are the military implications that push Wildberries into its vulnerability. It has disrupted not only its civilian supply lines, but it has disrupted uh, its military supply lines as a result. Um, it's a very bad deal when it comes to these logistical hubs that are
pretty much not military guarded, but they look like civilian commerce, but they're really just another way of distributing weapons, the other things that you might not know about. Favors that are that are done in the heads of wildberries. Like the heads of wildberries are the ones who allow these kinds of things to happen. And and that's it. Command coordination. The text implies that Wildberry's logistical corridors were to synchronize troop movements and resource allocation, effectively turning a retail network into a strategic backbone for Russia's summer offensive. I mean, sometimes when the whole country is destroyed, sometimes that's the only thing that could help. Geopolitical context, hybrid warfare. The Kremlin's approach exemplifies economic militarization, using private enterprises to extend state power while maintaining plausible deniability. See, what happens is when the state starts to involve itself in a in a company like Wildberries, it starts to it starts to be sold. The Wildberries will be sold to the Kremlin at the end. Um, it's not gonna last. Civilian risk involving regular citizens and well, some logistical hubs will be sold to the Kremlin. I'm betting $1 million on that. Civilian risk involving regular citizens and logistical blurs, ethical boundaries, exposing non-combatants to military retaliation and international scrutiny. Like they might look like wild berries, but in reality, it's just a Kremlin dosed uh, a logistical hub. Regional consequences, such as integrations, deepens Russia's entrenchment in occupied territories and complicates post-war reconstruction as civilian infrastructure becomes militarized. Strategic assessment dimensions expand supply to reach civilian networks dependent on military systems vulnerable to sanctions, sustains domestic morale through continued goods flow, risk of international isolation, enables rapid resource deployment, civilian exposure, and potential intelligence leaks. Political demonstrates Kremlin control and adaptability, undermines legitimacy through blurred civilian military lines. In conclusion, the alleged Kremlin Wildberries partnership symbolizes Russia's adaptive wartime logistics, merging commerce and defense to sustain operations under pressure. Yet this strategy carries a high systemic risk of logistical fragility, civilian exposure, and reputational damage that would erode long term stability.